Alright, hopefully this works out. So, here's the plan, right? I was testing some stats and stuff yesterday on between my Valkyrie and my Slayer, right? So my Valk, let's do a quick run through right here, as you can see. My Valk is base frax. I quit like 9 to 10 months ago and I just recently came back. I've been back for about 2 weeks, right? So I sold all my gear. So my Valk is back to being base frax. My Valk still has my old stigmas, obviously. So as you can see here, I have 5 superior stigs, a +4 rare, and a base rare there. I am running all attacks. This is just so y'all can see, right? So yesterday, everybody talks about how Slayer's bad, right? Well, I believe I have come up with a build that actually makes Slayer viable because my Valk timer and my Slayer's timer in the training room were the exact same. Now, obviously, there's a ton of RNG that plays into all the numbers, right? So even if I can get the timer within a few seconds of each other for the classes, I think that kind of like proves a point, right? The difference between I'll get into the numbers later because I added up the difference between the stigmas and the bonuses or whatever, right? But for a quick rundown, my Slayer has all base rare stigmas, so its stigmas are far worse than my Valk's. My Slayer does not currently have the 3% damage title from like AA or Conquer Chandra Manaya. If y'all have been around the game, you know that those titles give you a 3% flat damage boost, right? My Slayer doesn't have any of those, whereas my Valk does. What my Slayer does have now is a base +0 Kaya's weapon that a friend gave to me to help me get back on my feet. I compared the Kaya's +0 weapon to the base frax Runeglaive here, and I looked at all the bonuses, the ones that you can't change and everything, right? Because we're not going to compare the ones you can change. We're comparing the ones we can't change. All of those stats were actually the same. Obviously, the Kaya's had a different attack modifier. So, what I personally believe that the +0 greatsword on the Slayer is a rough equivalent to make up for all the damage percentage differences that my Valk has over my Slayer. Because I've went here and I've already crunched all the numbers, right? My Valk, I added up all the stigma differences and shit. So counting the fact that my Valk has a 3% damage title and the Slayer doesn't, so taking that into the math, my Valk has 12.7% extra bonus damage when attacking from behind and or normal flat damage. And then my Valk has an extra 2.8% enraged damage compared to my Slayer. And obviously during enraged phases you can add those two together, so you get 15 point something extra bonus damage during enraged phases and 12.7% extra bonus damage throughout the whole fight compared to my Slayer. However, my Slayer has the +0 Kaya's weapon, whereas my Valk has the +0 base frax Runeglaive. So, I did write down my timers yesterday, but, writing it down is different than having video evidence. So I'm going to attempt to recreate my runs today and hopefully try to get these timers relatively close again. And if they do come close, I believe that this is justification for Slayers. One thing that has to be taken note when it comes to Slayers is in order for my Slayer's damage to equal my Valk's damage, the fight has to last long enough for the Slayer to get in 2 burn phases. So a Slayer getting 2 of its burn phases in is equivalent to the Valk getting 1 God's Fall in plus all the downtime, blah, 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 blah. The reason why Slayers, even if I can prove that Slayer's damage is not that bad, the reason Slayers are still going to be kind of looked down upon is because if you're running with a super stacked group, and you're speed running and the fight doesn't last long enough for the Slayer to get the extra burn phase in, then yes, overall its damage is going to be worse than the Valk's, just because it has to get 2 burn phases in for it to be equal. But in longer fights, obviously it comes more into play at lower gear levels too. I think it's going to, like, the damage is not as bad as everybody makes it out to be. So we're gonna see what I get on my Valk here for damage for final timer, right? I'm not worried about like the actual DPS so much as just what the final kill time is. So I'm just gonna kind of focus here for a sec. Oh, you know, maybe I should put on a fucking. Oh wait, no, I'm retarded. Never mind. Ignore that. I forgot I used the dragon to balance it out.
You playing Sonic? It sounds like Sonic music.
Oh, I should have waited on that burst. Whatever. It's close enough. We all make mistakes, right? I'm probably going to make a mistake when I'm in a dungeon too, so. And again, keep in mind, guys, I'm just coming back after like 10 months, so my rota's probably not the best. Like, I'm definitely not as good as I used to be, but I mean, I'm not like a trash Valk, right? So, you know, we'll see. I should have farmed rag again. Didn't. Close enough. Whatever, right? Alright, so 3 minutes, 2 seconds. Yesterday I got like 2:55-ish, right? And 3:3, so kind of close enough, right? It's still the same ballpark, right? So now I'm going to leave this training ground. I'm going to swap over to my Slayer, and both my Valk and my Slayer have the discount Kinlong, so I'm going to use the dragons to kind of balance out, make sure the buffs are the same, you know, like battle solutions, all that. So the dragon kind of helps ensure that the buffs are the same. Obviously, take note that I'm not building abyssal stacks before the fight starts, and I'm using the Mystic buff crystal on both of them, on both my Valk and my Slayer, and I'm waiting until the 5th cycle of the buffs. That way, you know, they kind of line up best, right? So I'm going to swap over to my Slayer here, and we're going to see how this fight goes. So I'm hoping this works out like it did yesterday, and I don't just look like an idiot. Because, I mean, like, obviously, like, across the server, right, you know, a lot of people think that Slayer's pretty bad, like, damage-wise. One thing I've seen, now, obviously, if this does work out, then that proves that this particular build that I have on my Slayer works. That's not to say that the way other people have their Slayers built will work. Because typically what I see is I'm running a hybrid build on my Slayer. Like, I have like a certain amount of crit, and then I'm building power from there. because I've went to like almost full crit Slayer before, and I realized that my shit still wasn't like critting that much. So I'm like, why do I have all this extra crit if it's not going to crit anyway, right? So I decreased my crit and then obviously built power, right? Because typically what I see is there's two types of Slayers I see. I always either see a full crit Slayer, or I see like an all power Slayer where they're going to hit like 200 mil on their unsheath, and then they're going to hit like a wet noodle for the rest of the fight. So like I almost never see anything in between. And I'm also, so my Slayer, right, just to kind of prove that everything is right. So here you can see my base rare stigmas. I have one soul stigma, if y'all are curious about that. One soul, and the rest are attack. And then here, my weapon. So there's my Kaya's weapon. Obviously, the attack modifier is higher than the base Frax weapon. But if you compare the green stats that are not changeable, those are all the same. And then for my build that I'm using, you can see I'm running double cooldown 6.9, and then there's the crit power. I was testing that yesterday. That's how all of this came to fruition, and me doing all this number crunching, was I was originally testing flat 6% damage versus crit power on Slayer, and I concluded that crit power is a little bit better on Slayer, so I'm going to go with that for now. So we're going to come over here, pull out my fucking skills. That way, I'm going to use the discount Kenlong, so all the buffs are the same, right? If I can find it somewhere in here. There it is. Right, and then triangle? Yeah, okay. So into the training ground we go.
Secrets then.
So
and another thing too, as far as like making the argument that the Kaya's weapon is relatively equal to the lack of stigmas but increased gear, both my Slayer and my Valkyrie are item level 463. So now I know like item level is not like an exact measure of strength, but I mean the game also thinks that my characters are quote unquote the same strength, so that's also another like support to my claim for that, right? So I'm gonna bust this Mystic Crystal here. I'm gonna walk up here and wait for the cycle of buffs where they line up again before I start this fight. So we're just gonna have to hang tight for a minute. While we're waiting, here's another look at my gear. You can see, just all my gear. I don't have. My Valk has a little bit better innerwear. My Valk also has a +2 bracelet, which means it has an extra 11 attack modifier. It's like negligible. Doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be busted. It'd be way more powerful. There's no need for that. I think it's fine where it's at.
So we're just gonna sit here and wait for the buff, and then I'll start the fight when it lines up. Alright, there we go.
Well, the misleading fact is the misleading thing is the fact that they don't release the fact that there is a crit cap on the individual skills. So like, you start at like 0% crit chance, but it only caps out at a 40% chance, and once you build enough crit to hit that 40%, then it doesn't matter if you go over it. That's something that a lot of people don't realize. There's no way for them to realize it, right? Because the only way that we know that is because Theory Crafters from PC. That's yeah, there's ways to prove it in the game, but you'd have to have a fairly like high intellect to like understand that. I can set up an experiments to where I could prove that without actually having that information. But you can't you're not gonna be able to do that for the average person. But obviously they figured that out back when Terra PC was around, right? So, and that's a big thing that people, most people don't even have a chance to know that that's a thing, right? Well, I mean, it did. I mean, that's a fact.
There you have it. I'm actually quite impressed. My Slayer, obviously, as you can see from the timer at 248, that's actually that's like, what, 12, 15 seconds faster. And I mean, that just kind of proves my point that, Slayer, because obviously, there's always going to be haters, right? There's probably going to be people that say, oh, well, you just don't know how to play Valk. You suck at Valk, right? Okay, first of all, I've mained Valk. I have sucked very bad at Valk before. When Valk first came out, I had no idea how to play this game. I was bad. Like, so bad I was running full crit Valk, right? I've seen bad. I've been bad. I've seen bad, right? I know how to play Valk. I may not be the best in the world. I may not be number one on leaderboard. I mean, hell, I don't even have gear, right? But, like, I'm at least an above average Valk. You can't deny that, right? So, using the Valk as my constant, right? And I already told you how my Valk has all this extra damage percentage than my Slayer to make up for the attack modifier that the Kaya's weapon has, right? I think this goes to prove that Slayers are not as bad as people think they are. And I hope I'm going to try to, get this video ported over to YouTube as well and post it. And I'm hoping this might shed some light on Slayer. So, yeah, that's going to be the video.